Okay, so what do I mean when I say the problem is the solution? That's an adage in permaculture. You might have heard me use it a number of times. And how can we use the problem is the solution to help permaculture unpack, deconstruct, and heal from its colonizer, white supremacy, misogyny, and childism problems? And I already know the perma bros and the preppers are going to come at me like, permaculture doesn't have those things. Stop using those woke terms. And we don't need to talk about those things. Permaculture is just hippie gardening, sustainable gardening. I encourage you to go check out my permaculture playlist and any of my videos on YouTube to explain how permaculture is not gardening. Gardening is one aspect you can apply permaculture design principles to in order to create more abundant yields and reduce your workload. But permaculture is a design system that obviously I have been a big fan of for more than 25 years, but it definitely has some problems. Not the least of which is that it was crafted by two white Australian men who took heavily from Indigenous practice, often without giving proper credit, and that permaculture has some significant veins of colonialism, white supremacy, and misogyny running throughout it. And that in the last several years, the fact that folks who are more like right-wing prepper, LDS, homesteady, evangelical types have really glommed on to a few aspects of permaculture while throwing away the more radical and all of the efficacious aspects of permaculture. That means that those problems have been exacerbated by those perma bros who want to do a capitalism and want to water permaculture down to something less than it is. And that means that those aspects of colonialism and white supremacy and misogyny have really risen to prominence, right? They have really filtered up to the top where we can see them more readily than we could in the past, in the 70s, when Mollison founded permaculture. So when I say the problem is the solution, what Mollison, the founder of permaculture, meant by that is that you don't have a slug problem, you have an abundance of duck food, right? In every problem, there is a hidden solution. It is not that we have a waste product, it's that we have a resource for which we have yet to find a use. Right. And I think that this issue that really got folks' hackles up, like to the tune of hundreds of thousands of views and like hundreds of comments, especially a ton of comments from white dudes who did not like me pointing out the fact that permaculture really has a colonizer mindset. And there are a lot of just valid criticisms of permaculture. I think therein, in this, acknowledging this reality, we can harness the problem is the solution. A lot of what has frankly pissed me off about permaculture in the last several years is seeing these kind of white conservative dudes wanting to do a capitalism with it. And therefore, they want to make it less controversial, less contentious. They want to hide away the harder conversations, like don't look at these, don't unpack these, don't address these issues at all. Because what we really want to do is make permaculture palatable to people who have low distress tolerance, who don't want to look at hard issues, and definitely don't want to unpack their own privilege at all. I want them to buy my workshop. I want them to buy my 10-part program. I want them to buy my garden planner. I want them to come to my $9,500, 2-week-long PDC. Those folks have tried to, as I said, water down permaculture or lock away the parts of permaculture that are more radical, that are harder to deal with, that make us really uncomfortable. But those are the places that we really need to dig in. Those are the concepts that we really need to bring to the light if we're going to create sustainable communities. Not just sustainable communities, regenerative communities. Permaculture is about healing our relationship with other people, creating just functional societies, and healing our relationship with the planet, growing our food, building our communities in a way that has a positive impact on the planet, not a negative one. And in permaculture, we know that all things are connected. So you cannot ignore the connections that exist over here. You cannot ignore the problems without them kind of festering and, leaching out into other aspects of permaculture and making your design not as effective as it could be or completely ineffective altogether. Okay, so if the problem is that permaculture is not without its problems, it's flawed. It has issues with a colonizer mindset, with white supremacy, with misogyny, with guruification of white men, and the exclusion of honoring and embracing not only Indigenous traditional practice, but also Indigenous people that are doing permaculture, because there are loads of them. There are loads of non-white male folks all around the world who are doing really good permaculture. It's not all conservative white prepper bros trying to do a capitalism selling you their online courses. So if the problem is the solution, then that means we need to address the problem head on. We need to face the reality that permaculture has these issues. We need to open up that box, unpack it, hold up all of the components and examine them and say, what do they have to teach us? Why did Mollison think like this? Why has permaculture appealed to a conservative, kind of evangelical, LDS prepper audience? Or rather, why have certain components of it appealed to them? And why have they wanted to, hide away or ignore the majority of what permaculture is? If our goals are earth care, people care, and fair share, then how has ignoring these issues in permaculture hindered us from reaching our goals? What of the 12 permaculture design principles can we bring into play to help us unpack and heal from these issues that run throughout permaculture and have brought in folks who have watered permaculture down to less than it is meant to be? In a capitalist society, permaculture is radical. It has always been radical. It will continue to be radical until we live in a permaculture society. So trying to make it something that appeals to the capitalist model, that is marketable to white men, white conservative men, is not getting us closer to a solution. That is repackaging permaculture into something less than what it truly is and taking us away from our goal. If the problem is the solution, then we need to face the problem head on so that it can teach us what solutions lie within. I, for one, would love to have more open conversations and exchanges. I've thought about what it would look like to set up either a live on TikTok or a panel discussion on my YouTube where we can have Indigenous voices in permaculture, women's voices in permaculture, queer voices in permaculture, voices that are not well represented who can talk about their experience with the issues in permaculture, with the colonizer mindset, with the white supremacy, with the misogyny, how that has impacted them and why they continue to practice permaculture and what they think permaculture could and should look like. While it may make us white folks uncomfortable to have these conversations, our feelings are just feelings. Feelings aren't facts. Feelings can't hurt us. They can be uncomfortable. We don't like to have to sit with them, but learning to do that is how we get to a place where we can start to unpack these issues and work toward our stated goals of earth care, people care, and fair share, creating more functional and just societies. And I really appreciate podcasts like Sustainable World Radio, Green Dreamer podcast, who host those less common voices in permaculture and try to amplify them. I would love to use my platform, and I hope other folks would as well, to have more frank, open conversations, to set our own fragility, our own pride aside, and to not feel attacked when we talk about the real criticisms of this philosophy, this design system that we believe in so much, right? It doesn't have to be infallible. It doesn't have to be free of problems. Wrestling with these issues out in the open is hard, it's messy, and it's worth it. I would argue it's necessary in order to create the earth care, people care, and fair share that we want and need.